Good afternoon and welcome to The Big Show. The Big Show, we, as always, do it at about 5 o'clock every day, and we try and break down whatever's going on. We're brought to you by FanDuel Casino. We'll talk a little bit more about how FanDuel, even though it's football season's over, how FanDuel can still be something that you can utilize every single day if you want to. And, of course, it is one of those days where the Super Bowl happened yesterday. And, of course, the Super Bowl was won by Seattle. Now, one of the things I'll tell you about this Super Bowl game that's probably a little different than people had in mind, or maybe not, is that the team that won is a team that is built like an old-fashioned NFL team. And basically, what it comes down to is you had yesterday the Seahawks and the Patriots. And everybody basically has been saying, well, you know, you need to have an offensive-minded coach. You need to hire an offensive-minded coach in this NFL. And I think if you look at the 10 hires, the 10 guys that were hired, the 10 guys that were hired this cycle, right? It's one of those things where it's pretty clear that's where the NFL was. And the NFL decided, well, here we go. But a lot of the guys that got hired were offensive coaches. Now, the thing about it is, Jesse Minter is a defensive coach. He's one of the few defensive coaches that was hired. The Ravens, basically, even though they had, Lamar Jackson and probably are a team, if you think about it, that should have thought about going out and getting an offensive-minded coach. The reality is they are going to go with a defensive coach. John Harbaugh was a defensive coach, mostly a special teams coach, but he was a defensive backs coach. So let's add him to the list of defensive-minded coaches that were hired. But if you look at the rest of the class, okay, I mean, for the most part, and Robert Salah is a defensive guy too. But Stefanski's offense, McCarthy's offense, Brady's offense, Kubiak's offense, LaFleur's offense, Monken's offense. Hafley's actually a defensive-minded coach as well. So the reality is you've got, one? Out of the 10 coaches, you've got 1, 2, 3. You've got 3 defensive coaches, 7 offensive coaches, basically, is what was hired. Everybody wants an offensive coach. And the Steelers, of course, went out and hired Mike McCarthy. And while people weren't exactly, when people weren't exactly thrilled with the fact that Mike McCarthy was hired, they at least were like, well, we got an offensive-minded coach now and things will be different. My thing is they probably aren't going to be different because McCarthy's sort of an old-school coach anyway. But here's what we learned yesterday, I think at least, and probably this season we've learned. That you can win the championship with a defensive-minded coach and who's a guy who cares about the running game, defense, the running game, and playing football the right way. Okay? And what I mean by that is start with the defense. You know, the Steelers have continually talked about how, they want to be a great defensive team. They want to be a team that's built with their defense. They want to be a team that goes out and dominates on defense and then wins with their running game and wins, the old-fashioned way. The problem is when you look at it from afar, they haven't accomplished that in the last few years, and mostly because their defense wasn't good enough. What I saw yesterday from Seattle was a defense that really plays well. A defense that really plays well. A defense that actually does good things. And what I mean by that is they know their role. They know where they're supposed to be. They're disciplined. And you know what? They're good enough to beat teams with their front four without having to go out and do a whole bunch of exotic blitzing and all that stuff. They're kind of a throwback defense in that way. They're able to dominate with their defensive line. They're able to basically get four guys to the quarterback. They're able to do these things because they've got enough good players on defense up front that they can go with 7 and get there. It's hard to, because you got to go find 4 guys that can dominate up front, but they did. I just feel like it's one of these things where they basically played a really good football game. Somebody asked me earlier if I could compare them to, say, the Bears, from the mid-'80s, or the Ravens that won it that one year, or a couple of the Steelers teams that have won it, or, but they're a different kind of team. Those defenses we're talking about, they absolutely just went out and they were intimidating. They made big plays. They were dominant. They just kicked the tail of the teams they were playing against. What Seattle did was very simple. They just played their defense all year long and played it really, really well. They knew what they needed to do. They knew what needed to be done, and they went after it and got it done. And so to me, I look at it and basically say, they're very well coached, they're disciplined, and their defense was really, really good. That was a part of the equation. There's an offensive league, I know, and everybody talks about the offense and all the other good stuff. But the reality is the defense is why they won. The defense is why they won, not the offense. The defense led the way. And again, it wasn't like, I was watching like the Bears or the Ravens from those, where those teams were just so dominant on defense and, they got after it and they, they did get 6 sacks, but there was nothing really all that exotic about what they were doing. And there was nothing really, that complicated about what they were doing. They just were really good at what they did. They made plays. They were able to, keep the Patriots and Drake May guessing a little bit without even having to try and make it that hard in terms of, what they were doing. I think that was good. I think that's good stuff. It's what you want to see, to be honest. It's what you want to see, period. And that's what it's very, very good. It's very, very good in many, many ways to see it. It was a fun game to watch. They were good. They played hard. They played well. They played well in many ways. At all 3 levels of defense, they were good, very good. And I think that's what really, really stuck out to me. And I feel that's where we're at. I feel like that's where they are and what they're doing. I thought they were really good. Now, when you go and you combine that with this, early in the game, there were some opportunities for Seattle to quote unquote go for it. Right? Go for it instead of kicking field goals and taking points. Just go for it, because that's what all these teams did in the playoffs. And most of them, that's the reason why they went home. Mike McDonald understood. I got a great defense. They're playing really well. So let's just add points when we can add points and see what it looks like. And if we have to try and go for it late in the game, we will. But let's add points when we can add points. And I'll be honest with you, they kicked 3 field goals in the first half. to get up 9-0, which is 2 scores. And when they got up 9-0, I was like, this game's over. I mean, they got up 2 scores. They used their kicker made the 3 field goals, and the next thing you know, it's 9-0. I don't know about you, but it really, 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 really felt this game's over. They are not going to score against this team. And really, they didn't until the 4th quarter or whatever, but the reality is by that point it was 19-0. And, they did score, or whatever, but that doesn't mean a thing. It was 19-0. And at that point, they were just trying to do everything they could possibly do, to get back in the game, the Patriots, I mean. But really, the reality is they played a smart game, the Seahawks. They knew they had great defense. They played great defense. They weren't afraid to punt and kick field goals. And they basically won the game the old-fashioned way. And then the third part of that is the running game. Kenneth Walker's a really good running back. They allowed him to grind out yards for them. It took pressure off Sam Darnold. As long as they had a lead, they didn't need Sam Darnold to try and do too much. They did a really good job. A really, really good job of trying so hard to just keep the ball in front of them, keep the sticks moving, and allow the defense to continue to win the game. That's what it is. That's what it takes. And the only point I'm trying to make is this. What they basically did was they said very, very, very much. They said that we don't believe that the Patriots offense can beat our defense. So all we're going to do is try and do the absolute best we can do with what we have on offense. And if we can protect Sam Darnold and make it so he doesn't have to throw the ball a ton, which means he's not going to turn it over a ton, which means we're going to have an opportunity, basically to win the game, then we're going to do that. Now, he did throw the ball 38 times. A lot of that was just kind of underneath check down kind of stuff. I mean, they threw over the top a few times to try and make big plays, but for the most part, it was a lot of underneath the kind of stuff. And Drake May had 2 interceptions. He fumbled. Those 3 turnovers were a big part of the game, but again, all 3 of them were forced by the Seattle's defense. So my thing with the whole shoot and match is that we moved to the Steelers, and of course, they went out and hired an offensive-minded coach. And that is what I would tell you is important. They basically went and got an offensive-minded coach, but what we've learned with the Eagles from last year, with the Seahawks this year, right? We've learned over the course of the last few years, even going back to Denver with Peyton Manning, defenses can still win championships. And that's, to me, the lesson we learned again this year. And so while I understand why the Steelers wanted to get an offensive-minded coach and why they went and got Mike McCarthy, I think it's a little bit of a fallacy. At least for me, that you need an offensive-minded coach. Everybody wants to hire these young offensive gurus. And I get it to a point. I understand how the league is and what happens in the league and the way that it's played and all that stuff. But I think sometimes it's oversold that you need to have an offensive-minded coach to win. I'll give you another great example is DeMeco Ryans and the Texans. I mean, he's built a team that's really good. They've won 3 playoff games in the last 3 years. They haven't been able to get to the next level, but again, I think that has everything to do with the fact that their quote-unquote young franchise quarterback hasn't played well in the playoffs. But they've actually won a playoff game each year because their defense is so good and so dominant. And that, to me, I think is what the message is. It's not about offense or defense. It's hire a good coach. Hire a good coach that knows what he's doing, that understands the way that football is played in 2026. And that is where you're at. That's where it's at, to me. It's important to remember that. And whether or not it is going to work with Mike McCarthy, to me, it's going to come down to, do they build their defense or not? Do they build their defense? Do they make their defense really good or not? If they don't, then to me, I don't know, to be honest, what they're going to accomplish with an offensive-minded coach. That's what is kind of ridiculous in many, many ways to me. They've got to build their roster up and get better. If they build their roster up and get better, then they have a shot. People say, well, they're bringing back Aaron Rodgers. Can they win with Aaron Rodgers? And I say they can win with Aaron Rodgers as long as they are willing to build the roster around Aaron Rodgers and get it to a point where he doesn't have to win games on his own. And I know with Mike McCarthy as the coach, everybody thinks, well, we're going to basically, we're going to do what we have to do to get it done. But we're also going to make sure that when we do get it done, we have a roster that is capable of winning. The Steelers' defense was not good enough because the Steelers' defense wasn't built the correct way. It just wasn't. And I think that's a problem. It really is. It feels a lot to me like that's where they have to start to worry about working and getting better. Make their defense better. And I know they spent a lot of money on their defense. And I know that, there's a lot of star, quote unquote, star kind of guys on their defense, but they've got to make their defense better. That's where it has to start. And that's where, if they don't, doesn't matter that they have an offensive-minded coach. Doesn't matter that they have Mike McCarthy. Doesn't matter that they have 3 wides on their offense. Doesn't matter. None of that stuff matters. Their defense has to get better. Because I don't know that if you have a guy like Aaron Rodgers, you can go and win shootouts against some of the guys you have to play in the AFC in the playoffs. But I think every team now, and here's the other thing, I hope one of the things is that the pendulum has now swung back to people seeing the value, coaches seeing the value in taking points early in games. Because I think if you take points early in the games, you make the second half in these playoff games, you make it a lot easier on yourself. You make it so that you now don't need necessarily nearly as much in terms of, points to be able to have a lead, to be able to play the game the way you want to play it. Once it got to be 9-0, guess what? Now all of a sudden, the Patriots had to play a different way. The Patriots now had to try and catch up. And when they got to 12-0, they really had to play a different way to catch up. And then when it got to be 19-0, now it's desperation time. And I thought, to me, the Seahawks, really kind of dominated the game long enough that now, for the most part, long enough, they dominated the game long enough that those touchdowns at the end didn't mean a whole lot, even though people were trying to create some sort of drama. There just wasn't that much drama in this game. They completely owned the game. And I think that's important. So, for me, when I watched the Super Bowl, I kept thinking about the Steelers last night. Because the Steelers are a team that has said they want to win the games with defense. They want to win the games with the running game. They want to win the games with the field goals. Period. That, they obviously want to score touchdowns, but the Steelers also, they want to play football the way it used to be played. And I think the Seahawks showed you can win that way. The problem is the Steelers haven't been good enough that way. They just haven't. Steelers' defense hasn't been good enough. Their running game hasn't been good enough. They've been trying to build both for the last 5 or 6 years. And you know what? When you don't have one of these franchise elite quarterbacks, guess what? Sometimes it becomes a lot more difficult to win, but you can win if you have a roster that's built to win. I mean, I look at the Eagles. Does anyone really believe Jalen Hurts is like this elite quarterback? He's not. I know that the national guys love him. Of course they love him, and we all know kind of why. But my point is they love him. But is he an elite quarterback? Is he a guy that, is going to lead you to a Super Bowl if he doesn't have the roster that they've had around him, the defense, the offensive line, right? It's just not going to happen. And I think that's the thing that you have to really understand here. Like, to me, you better have a real, really good offensive line, and you better have a good defense if you're going to have an opportunity to win, especially if you don't have an elite quarterback. And the Steelers don't have an elite quarterback, and they're not going to have an elite quarterback. Period. That's what you have to remember. It's just now, to me, one of those things where I'm glad the Seahawks won because they're exactly the kind of team, okay? It was exactly the kind of team that we've been told for a long time you can't win without a quarterback. And I think Sam Darnold's good, but he's not great. I mean, Sam Darnold probably is very similar to Aaron Rodgers. He can make a lot of throws. Aaron Rodgers at this stage. He can make a lot of throws. He's poised enough at times. He's talented kind of enough. But the flip side of it is you probably don't want him throwing it 45 times a game. He's not a guy probably who's going to carry you and your team to a championship. He's just not. And it's the same thing with Aaron Rodgers, who's going to be the Steelers quarterback. Let's face it. I mean, everybody now is trying to be all coy about it and everything, but come on, man. I don't see any way that he's not going to be the guy, period. So to me, when you look at it that way, I really believe he has a chance to basically, come back and they can win, but they got to make the roster around him better. They got to fortify the offensive line. Start there. Make the offensive line better. And then they've got to also go out and make sure that they make their defense better. And if they do that, they'll have a chance to win maybe with him. But that's neither here nor there. Because everybody seems to be stuck on them going out and getting a franchise quarterback. You don't have to have a franchise quarterback to win. The Seahawks proved it. The Eagles have proved it. I know that the Broncos, for instance, had Peyton Manning, but at that stage, was he really a franchise quarterback? He could barely throw the ball, but their defense was good enough. It can happen. And I think one of the things is with Aaron Rodgers, if you're going to have McCarthy and Rodgers, that's great, but you better be able to stop the other team. I mean, one of the most eye-opening stats about Aaron Rodgers versus Tom Brady in his career played about, I think he had 15 years out of 21. I think he had 15 seasons or 16 seasons where he had a top 5 defense. Aaron Rodgers twice in 19 seasons had a top 5 defense. Period. It's a big difference. It's a big, big difference. So that's where I'm at right now from that standpoint. You have to really, really kind of take that and look at it with Mike McCarthy and say, well, if you aren't going to, build a, first-rate dominant defense, can you really win the way you're trying to win? I just don't know, what really is going to happen. I just don't. So at that point, that's where we're at. Now then, let me get to a couple of other things real quick. It's one of those things where I feel like the Pirates have really screwed this Andrew McCutchen thing up royally. They signed Marcell Ozuna, who's obviously going to be their DH, which means his Kutch is over. The Kutch era is done. I don't know that they've done it the right way. I'm not saying that Kutch needed to come back. I just think that really when you look at it from afar, I think that Kutch could have been probably the guy that they handled like a superstar. But now he's probably not coming back. Or he's definitely not coming back. They got to, so that's where I would tell you. I look at Kutch and I just say he's basically, kind of one of these things where they may have actually created a riff with one of their former stars and one of their most popular players, which is sad because I think that it should have ended better for Andrew McCutchen than it did. But you know what? Life goes on. Everybody's career comes to an end. It'll be interesting to see if McCutchen tries to hang on and play somewhere else. I doubt he will, but it'll be interesting to see if he will. But to me, the Pirates kind of left him out there and didn't do a very good job of making sure that everybody kind of knew it was just sort of his retirement or his retirement was coming or, going to happen. Period. Should have done a better job with that. Really should have. And that's, to me, where I would tell you, he is. So at the end of the day, Ozuna, if he does what he did in 2024, obviously he becomes a really good pickup for them. If he does what he did in 2025, I'm not sure you really upgrade a DH, but that remains to be seen. Their lineup is better. The Pirates lineup is better than it was. I think it, maybe has a chance to be one of their better lineups in a number of years. That's not saying much. But by the same token, they've got a lot of guys that you've got to make sure that they are able to be good enough to, get it done. And I just don't know if they have that. Period. Just don't know if they have that. So, here it is. Here we are. And this is where we're getting to. The Pirates, pitchers and catchers are reporting, starting to report here in the next week and a half. All of them will, all teams will probably be, I think all teams in the next week and a half will be in camp. And then from there, we'll start to see the lineup come together and everything else. But the reality is you get Ozuna, he's going to be your DH. There's no room on this roster now for Andrew McCutchen. I wish they'd have done it better, and they didn't. And I would hate to see Andrew McCutchen go play somewhere else, but, of course, he's already done that, so it wouldn't be that big of a deal. Either way, we'll continue to follow what the Steelers do, what the Pirates do, and everything else. We'll be back tomorrow. Enjoy your day.
Thank you for checking out this content from Post-Gazette Sports. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all of the sports coverage the Post-Gazette has to offer, visit post-gazette.com.